Josh Proctor is a wanted man. Cade Stover, continuing the conversation we had about him yesterday, should he play both sides of the football for Ohio State? And is it wise that Ryan Day and other coaches let players decide if they want to change positions? All that and more right here on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, March 31st in the year 2022, and today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. I would also like to thank everyone out there for making Locked on Buckeyes their first to listen or first watch of every single day. Let's play a little scenario, and you are at the forefront of this story. You are a person that has been very successful at whatever skill, whatever job, whatever craft, whatever trade you want to pick. You can pick that. But you are somebody that when you pick that trade or you pick that job, maybe you pick that sport, whatever it is, you're successful at it. You've been successful, and all of a sudden, something comes and abruptly stops your progress and really knocks you out of the trade, the sport, the job that you chose. Maybe an injury to where you cannot perform at that, in that job, trade, skill, sport, for about a year. You're basically taking a year off from the thing that you love, thing that you're doing. And then once you get back to being able to get back to work, you have to work your way back up. You have to get your feet wet. You have to learn things that are new right in front of you because you have been out of the game for so long. Then all of a sudden, when you come back, there's somebody else that's there. That's the leader that is leading the ship, that is calling the shots. And not only do you like this new person, they like you too. But the one thing neither of you know is how you will perform when you're back in the fold with the team, with in your place of employment, back on the field, back on the court. If you pick the sport, whatever it is, they don't know how you'll perform. You don't know how you'll perform. But the early indication between both of you is that this is a connection that we really, really need. This is something that's similar between Josh Proctor and Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles, the new defensive coordinator at Ohio State, who loves what he has seen from certain guys that haven't been on the field yet due to injury and recovering and things of that nature. And then also you have Josh Proctor, who is a player who's recovering from injury, that has had a few injuries throughout his time at Ohio State. And he is somebody that Jim Knowles believes Ohio State wants on the field. They want him on the field as quickly as they can, of course, when he gets healthy and recovers, because Josh Proctor is going to be someone that's going to be very, very big and instrumental for this Ohio State defense. Last year, I said it. I think he was a starting free safety. I understand the injury that he had early in the year. Literally thrust and propelled Bryson Shaw to be the starter. And we all saw how that was last year. We have seen some clips this year during practice. Some things Bryson Shaw struggled with last year, he's still struggling with right now. Luckily, these struggles, this is spring practice. This is not game time to where the result at the end of the game is going to be a win or a loss. Now, it is going to be a win or a loss on that rep, a win or a loss on that practice. That is true. However, we're not getting the, blown coverage. You bid on the play action and the pass goes over the top, touchdown, Ohio State loses, and all the fingers are pointed at Bryson Shaw. That's not happening right now. And I don't think it's going to happen this year because I do believe, of course, this is my hope, prayer, is that Josh Proctor is healthy all throughout this upcoming season. Here is what Jim Knowles had to say about Josh Proctor, somebody that he hasn't really gotten to see very much on the field due to his recovery and his rehab from his injury. Quote, "I haven't seen him really do anything. We need him. We want him. You know, I've seen him on film from last year. He's a guy that can really change the game. He's what we want at safety. So I just want him to get healthy, end quote. Now, this is not the only player that Jim Knowles is high on, or Jim Knowles has spoke highly of in regards to things that Ohio State is currently doing on defense. I'm going to read a little bit from an article that I'm reading. Ronnie Hickman's a player that has been mentioned. Court Williams has been mentioned. Tanner McAllister has been mentioned. Be looking forward to understanding these terms: free safety, bandit, or boundary safety, and then the nickel safety. These are all positions that these three men, throwing Josh Proctor, Proctor will be the free safety, that these men will be great assets to this defense. Jim Knowles also had more high praise about Ronnie Hickman. Quote, I love Ronnie Hickman. I think he's got the skill. I think he's got the savvy. I just think he's a great piece in the middle to run the show back there. I just like the way he plays and handles his business. And then Court, I think is an excellent leader. We're going to continue to look at him in terms of the matchups that we may face from wide receivers, because if anything, he needs to improve. It's that I got to make sure I put him in good positions, but I know I can go with him. I know I can trust him, and I know that he's going to give everything, and that's a matter of me to put him in the right position, end quote. Jim Knowles, one of the best things about him is it doesn't take him very long to recognize talent. Doesn't take him very long to recognize the right places for him to put said talent for that player to be successful. Doesn't really take him very long. And I do think that when we have Josh Proctor getting healthy, when we have Court Williams on the field, Tanner McAllister on the field, Ronnie Hickman on the field, whatever variation of those players that are on the field together, only 3 of the 4 will be on the field together at one time. I do firmly think Ohio State's defensive backs will be a solid unit for Ohio State. Offensive line should be solid. Running back should be solid. Quarterback, wide receiver should be solid. Defensive line should be solid. Still working on those things. Linebackers should be solid. Can't concretely say yes, but the defensive backs might be one of the, if not the most solid positions that Ohio State has this year. Yes, everyone's going to rant and rave about the wide receivers and running back. Well, not the running backs between Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson. They're not getting enough credit. Add in Dallin Hayden and Evan Pryor, Marcus Crawley. This team can be loaded and have a lot of guys out there at that position. I don't think any of them have transferred. If they have, forgive me, it just escaped my mind. This room, defensive back position, is huge. Josh Proctor is a leader, and I cannot wait to see him back on the field consistently for the Ohio State Buckeyes. So a day ago, we had a conversation here on the podcast about Cade Stover. I don't know why I was thinking somebody else's name. We had a conversation about Cade Stover in his decision to go back to tight end. And this sparked a thought in my mind. Kind of briefly touched on it yesterday. Didn't want to go too deep into it because I knew I was going to talk about it today. Should Cade Stover, or could we see Cade Stover play both sides of the football? Play tight end and linebacker. There's a should and there's a could we. And I say could we because as we go to the Ohio State football schedule for next year, you're going to see that there might be some times when Ohio State plays teams that play 12 personnel or 22 personnel. 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. 22 personnel, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. When you see teams that play that way, sometimes the jack linebacker or even the Leo position might not be as important in those games because Ohio State's going to have to play 3 linebackers. Now, you might say the Leo in those games will be specific, not so much a jack linebacker, because you'll want to have that jack linebacker to have his hand in the ground instead of a 2-point stance moving around on the defensive line, which is very, very true. But I do think, though, let's go one question first. Should Cade Stover be a player that can play both sides of the ball? Could he? Should he? Whatever way you're going to go. I know I just butchered it a little bit. Bear with me. When it comes to Ohio State's roster, I don't think there's a better strong side linebacker available than Cade Stover. I personally don't. You look at the depth chart, look at the players that are available. Reed Carrico is probably going to be more of an inside middle linebacker. Taraja Mitchell is probably going to be more of an outside, but you could put Taraja Mitchell on the outside opposite of Still Chambers. I still think Cade Stover is the better linebacker option. If you're trying to play 3 linebackers at one time, give me Cody Simon or Tommy Eichenberg, and give me Still Chambers at will, Eichenberg or Simon at the mic, and then give me at the Sam or the strong side linebacker, give me Cade Stover, done deal. Look at the tight end position. We did this a little bit yesterday, but little refresher. It's always good to hear things over and over and over. At the tight end position, there's no better option at starting tight end than Cade Stover. There's not. It's a luxury to have a player that can be your best on both sides of the ball. And when you think about the games, a few games that Ohio State was going to have, let me see here. Notre Dame, September 3rd, week number 1. Arkansas State, week 2, game 2. Toledo, game number 3. Rutgers, game 4. I'm skipping over a few for a reason. Penn State, Northwestern, Indiana. A lot of these schools that I'm mentioning, you're not going to see 2 tight end sets. But I do think Jim Knowles realizes, and he knows how teams are in the Big Ten, and it's a very physical brand of football. When you have Wisconsin, you're playing Wisconsin at home, but it's September 24th. Wisconsin's going to run out there 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends. I might have an unbalanced line as well. So all of these things there, unbalanced line, bring in an extra offensive lineman. Offset have 1 extra offensive lineman on one side of the line of scrimmage, to where you may have a tight end lined up as a left tackle where the tight end would normally go. You might have your left tackle in that tight end spot on the right side of the line. So you're going to have these different variations and different things, to where a Wisconsin that you play on September 24th, and then you play Iowa also at home. This is October 22nd, coming off of a bye week, which is a luxury when you're playing the Hawkeyes. They are a physical, disciplined football team. Those are 2 schools that pop out at me that say you're going to probably see some 2 tight end sets, some 3 tight end sets from them on offense. With Cade Stover being a guy that can play Leo or even just a regular, normal Sam strong side linebacker, and Cade Stover being a guy that's going to be that guy on the offensive side where he currently is, I do think there's a spot for him, and there might be a need for him to be somebody that's going to play a little bit of the tight end spot and the linebacker spot. Now, against Wisconsin, against Iowa, pinpointing those 2 teams, those are from the western portion of the Big Ten divisions, because they still have divisions. I'm ready for them to eliminate divisions, to get your 2 best teams in the Big Ten Conference Championship game, have a better shot of getting multiple teams in the college football playoff, because, well, outside of Ohio State and maybe a Michigan that may have a season like they had last year, just not beating Ohio State, it's very rare, currently constructed the way that the playoff is, you're going to get multiple teams in the playoff. Why? One, Big Ten football is not really that. It's outside of Ohio State and Michigan, Penn State. Big Ten football is not all that. It's not. Like, I know I talk Big Ten on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. I know Ohio State's in the Big Ten. I've grown up in Big Ten country. I don't care. Big Ten football is not all that. Outside of your top brands, there's a reason why people love the SEC. It just means more. There's a reason why people love Big 12 football. Well, of course, Oklahoma and Texas. It's a different breed of football. There's a reason why when USC is at its heyday, it's at its peak, it's something different. Yeah, it's something different. And as a whole, the SEC as a conference has better football from top to bottom than the Big Ten does. That brand of football that the SEC teams play is different than the Big Ten, similar to the Big Ten basketball schedule. And those teams, that brand of basketball works for them in their conference, not for the national stage. I get it. You have to play your league. You're going to play those teams a whole lot more. I think you're playing 18 or 20 conference games every single year. I get all of that. But is your only goal to win your conference regular season title in basketball, to win your conference tournament in basketball, or to win the national championship? Ultimately, I believe your goal is to win the national championship in football. Is your ultimate goal to be a player or be a team that just wins the Big Ten Conference Championship game and then goes and gets mollywopped in the bowl game? Or is it to win a national championship? Yes, you can dominate your conference and compete to win a national championship at the same time. Because when you compete to win a national championship, you're raising your level expectation, you're raising your standard, and the players will ultimately want to rise to that because they want to get on the field. I have no idea where that came from. It just came out. But I do think, back to business, I do think that Cade Stover, the possibility of him playing both ways is there. I do think that Jim Knowles, Kevin Wilson, they should be in discussion of saying, look, we know where our roster is. We know who the players are on our team. We know what Cade Stover brings on defense and on offense. We might have to split time with him. Sometimes in games, he might have to play tight end and linebacker due to personnel, due to our opponent, and due to us wanting to put ourselves in the best spot we can for our team to win the game. Yes, I know in 2022, you're probably not thinking a player is going to play both ways. It happened in the Rose Bowl with Utah. The running back had to play defensive back, and that bad boy got torched. I forget his name, but he even said, I'll play running back. I play running back. Now, I'm not really I'm being a little facetious and joking around from a video that I saw on the Twitter shortly after the Rose Bowl, but it's true. He plays running back. He got put into the defensive back position during the Rose Bowl. Woo-wee! And that boy got embarrassed. Could Cade Stover play both ways this year? Yes. Should he be somebody that is potentially used at both positions during a game? Absolutely. It's rare that I say that, especially in the way that football is today, but I do think Cade Stover possesses the skill set needed to be a good tight end at Ohio State, as well as being a good linebacker at Ohio State in the same game. From Josh Proctor to Cade Stover to sticking to something that Ryan Day has done not once, but a few times. I remember last year, this thought came to my mind, but I didn't go too deep into it on the podcast. I don't think I did at all, because it was kind of an afterthought, just one of those things that popped into my head, but never came through the microphone. It never was recorded a podcast about it. So I basically just said, okay, we'll be fine. We'll move on to the very next topic. But is it wise for Ryan Day, for the coaches at Ohio State, to allow their players to decide if they want to change positions? Last year, it came to my mind because DeMario McCall ended up deciding to change and to go from being wide receiver to defensive back. Wide receiver, slot receiver, or H-back when he first came to Ohio State, to being a corner back. You had last year Still Chambers go from being a running back to a linebacker. Do you remember we talked about it a couple times that Still Chambers was recruited by Ohio State to be he was recruited to be a running back. But the 24/7 Sports recruiting profile on Still Chambers, whoever wrote that breakdown of the scouting report, little 4 or 5 sentence little breakdown of Still Chambers, even said Still Chambers might be the best football player he could be at linebacker in college than at running back. Jeremy Birmingham from Letterman Row. He even said it. I don't know if he wrote it. I heard him say it on a podcast on Letterman. Well, maybe been Letterman Live, where he said that he has always believed that Still Chambers is best suited as a linebacker at Ohio State than at running back. We see what happened last year. We don't see him changing positions at all. We saw last year Cade Stover have to go from tight end to linebacker at the last minute due to injuries and due to lack of personnel and lack of players that are capable to play the position at a high level. Played very well. But then in this year, you see another change. This year, now last year was more out of necessity for Cade Stover, I believe what the coach is doing. But then you see this year, the coach is allowing another player to change positions. There's a fine line that a coach has when it comes to should he or is it wise for him to allow his players this type of freedom. One, you got to know your player is wise enough and knows what he's doing when making said decision. Now, when you think about Cade Stover, we went over it yesterday. He was recruited as a linebacker. Let me get my notes out very quickly. Yeah, here we go. He was recruited as a linebacker. He ended up moving to defensive end by the end of his freshman year. Over the next 2 years, he played tight end. So already right there, he gets to campus as a linebacker, moves up front, put his hands in the ground as a defensive end. That's one position change. Here's the second position change. He went to tight end as over a 2-year span, which was last year as well. But then last year, he went to linebacker. That's another position change. So LB to defensive end 1. DN to tight end 2, tight end to linebacker 3, and then linebacker back to tight end, that's 4. Now, the one that happened last year was out of necessity, but it still goes into the picture, the great snapshot of Cade Stover and the things that have gone on with him. Noah Potter, another player that I do believe has changed positions, trying to get on the field. Is it wise? If you have a great pulse on your team, if your hand is in tune, you're well in tune to what the needs of your team are. If you're in tune to the player, and you know the player can be somebody that can be able to comprehend and change positions at the drop of a hat. That was a weak snap. Got to do a whole lot better next time. Go for it. And it seems like the trust that Ryan Day has with his players, it goes to the type of player that he recruits. He's not just recruiting these guys that are whack jobs, that are embarrassments. Like, he is not recruiting those guys. Now, granted, sometimes you're going to have a bad apple or two. I'm a person that's on the record. I'll say it again. You got to have some guys on your team that have a few screws loose. You do, especially in defense. It's perfectly fine. It's not an indictment on you as a coach if one of your players is a little hothead or is a little loose-tempered or anything like that. It's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. Think about your favorite Buckeye or your favorite football player as a whole in the National Football League. He might have a couple screws loose. Think about your favorite football team right now in the NFL. Think about some of those guys that are on that team. Is it possible that they have a couple screws loose, or they might have a couple screws loose? Absolutely. It's not a bad thing. Actually, it's what coaches sometimes want their players to have, because when they do that, it's a great way for them to be the best they could be on the football field. It's a fine line. It's a very, very, very fine line. Because you allowing your player to have this much freedom, number one, it could hurt the team. Number two, it could hurt the player. Number three, if it hurts both at the same time, those could be more L's instead of W's at the end of games. That could be a bad apple, a cancer inside the locker room, to where a disgruntled player really affects the psyche and the mentals and the morale of other players on the team. It's a very, very, very touchy thing, but it's one of those that's a case-by-case basis. Is it wise for Ryan Day and these coaches to allow these players to change positions? It's their decision. For me, I gotta lean on them on this one. I can't say no, because what they're doing is not killing morale. It's not hurting players. It's not creating cancers in the locker room. It's not doing any of that. What's it ultimately doing? Giving DeMar McCall another chance to get on the field, because he realized it wasn't going to happen last year at wide receiver. What's it going to do? Noah Potter, get him a better chance to get on the field. Cade Stover, allowing him to have the freedom to make his own decisions. Steel Chambers, same type of thing. Diamante Traynham, coming from Arizona State, and you're going to see him in different rosters as Chip Traynham, going from running back to linebacker. Seeing what Steel Chambers did last year really helped him and pushed him, and was a great encouragement for him wanting to go from running back to linebacker. However, it's still a wise thing that Ryan Day says, hey, look, if you're going to go from running back, we know what you've done at running back. We know how you are at running back. We know what your tape says. Linebacker is a different thing, but if you want to come here and play linebacker, great. Go right ahead and do it. But look at these guys. They're going to tell you, we ain't going to hold your hand through this thing. We're not going to be the coaches that are just going to come around to sing Kumbaya the entire time and just say, oh, everything's going to be A-okay. No. That's not going to be who we are. Not at all. You know what? It's a case-by-case basis. Ryan Day has chosen this route, and it works for him. Other coaches choose a different route, and that's what works for them. You got to work and figure out how the cookie crumbles and move forward with the results. Guys, another fun show. One more show to go tomorrow. Basketball. We'll talk a little basketball transfer portal stuff. A couple point guards that are one from Kansas State, one from Indiana that are in the transfer portal. I do think both of them are guys that Chris Holtmann, if he does not hop on it quickly, could lose the chance at getting them. One of them, actually both I saw play in high school. One of them I saw play more than the other. We'll find out who it is tomorrow that Chris Holtmann, I do believe, needs to go after and get right now. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can send all of your emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of every single day. Now make the second listen of your day the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Ryan Tracy and former NFL defensive back Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects. You want to check out their mock draft Monday that they had come out earlier this week. We're in talks of having our own mock draft Monday episodes, plural, leading up to the NFL draft. Trust me, you want to hear what we have coming for you on Monday. A scout that's been on the podcast before just dropped mock draft 2.0. You'll love where a couple of Buckeyes go in the draft, where he predicts that they'll go with where they'll land as well. And some other guys that he has are the Buckeyes that will be drafted, some landing spots and things of that nature. Guys, the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, just like Locked On Buckeyes, they're both free and available wherever you get your fine podcasts.